Hi there, I'm Gary, welcome to my channel and welcome back if you've been here before. Today I'm finishing up the build of my KATY, my K2Y ambulance project, the 1/35th scale kit from Airfix, by finishing the diorama and doing some scratch build bits to make it look like the ambulance from the film Ice Cold in Alex. Now, if you've been watching, you know the next bit by heart, but if you haven't, then please remember, if you like the video, imperial thumbs up on the like button, if you'd be so kind, and subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. Maybe even click on the bell to make sure you get notified when my new videos pop up. And if you want to give a bit more concrete support, you can do that maybe through super thanks if you like, or alternatively through any of my partner channels, all of which are listed in the information box below. The most relevant might be the Airfix online store and the link to my Amazon storefront, where you'll find many of the materials and tools I use for model making and diorama building. So on then, and I will start by pimping my ride and making my KATY look ready for her close-up. So my first job for today is to make some sand mats. Now to do that, I'm going to have to cut a lot of what would be, I guess, bamboo rods or wooden rods, which then get sort of stuck together with long lengths of fabric, or in our case, paper and tape. However, now we need to make sure they're all pretty much the same length. I've had a look at the model and had a look at the film references, and I reckon they're about 12 millimeters long. So I've taped one steel rule to another one, with this gap here being 12 millimeters. Then I can just cut them to size, and they're going to be about 12 mil, right? Doesn't matter if there's a little bit of a variation, but they all want to be roughly the same. And we'll just go and make, I don't know, 20 or so of these. Right, just so everyone's aware of this, I have absolutely no idea if this is going to work or not. So we'll just see what happens. So I've got a sheet of 1 centimetre wide strip of white paper, cartridge paper. This is a bit heavier than printer paper or photocopy paper or whatever. And I'm just going to, I've put some white PVA down, and I'm just going to put in those little staves I made earlier, and there's quite a lot of them. There's 20 of them, I think. Reasonable, not too close together, but not too far apart either. What we're aiming to get is to be able to get another sheet of paper or strip of paper on top and be able to push it down between them to make a join, so these become like ribs along the length. Okay, come back in a little while when I've put all these on. Yeah, right, so I've got my 20 or so staves of bits of plastic here. What I've just done is run a little drop of white PVA along, and then just spread it out with a brush, a wet brush. You can, as soon as you use white PVA with a brush, rinse it out straight away and it will be fine. And I'll just let that dry for a little while, and then I'll put the top strip of paper on, and I'll show you what I mean when it's finished. Another interesting little detail here is that when I was looking at the film the other day, I noticed it had some markings on the front fenders, the front wheel arches, and they don't appear on the Airfix instructions, because of course the one in the Airfix instructions is just a generic ambulance in the desert. However, these markings and here are provided on the decal sheet. They bear a striking resemblance to the markings on the KATY in Ice Cold in Alex. An extraordinary coincidence, I'm sure. Oddly enough, they're not referenced in the instructions at all. So there's no placement marks for decal 16, either of them, or decal 21. So what I'm going to do is, because they bear a fair close resemblance to the one on the Ice Cold Katy. I'm going to put them on and then just sort of dull them down, because in the film, although it's black and white, you can't really see terribly well, they do look a lot dulled down, which they would be after, you know, a long time driving around the streets of Tobruk, or maybe across the Western Desert, let's say. Anyway, I'll put these on and then let them dry and then dull them down, maybe with a gentle, really gentle spray of the Portland stone paint, or maybe even just a very, very gentle rub down with something. I'll see how it turns out. So these go on the front wheel arches. Get rid of that hair there. There we go. Get my face. Let's go on the front wheel arches. You can see this one's just a black stencil for some formation or other. And on the other side, you just get that nice and level. That's a bit better. Okay. As I say, we'll let those dry off and then dull them down a little bit. And there's also one that fits on the back door here. Okay, so as usual, just a little bit of setting solution. And get rid of that. Yeah, there's a lot of hair on this thing, settled overnight. I need a dust-free chamber to build in, I think. Dust is terrible in here. Okay, so we'll just, again, level that up a bit, get a bit more natural place. Actually, that looks pretty good. So we'll leave those to dry. I don't know if you can see what I'm doing here to get this ribbed effect, but I'll try from this angle. It's very difficult to film it and actually do it. So what I'm doing is just holding this paper in place here, then using the blunt end of a spatula, blunt bit, just to push that next bit of paper in, okay, into place between the two plastic ribs, and just keep working your way along doing that. This one will stop the rib moving this way. Don't worry if the rib next moves on, because you can put it in place, shove it up, and then when you push down, it will go in for you, okay? And just work your way along, making these little corrugations. The paper does tend to wander around a bit, so let's be careful about that. Otherwise, yeah, just work your way along, and you'll end up with corrugated paper with ribs in. And when it's dry, you can just cut the paper off, like so. Then what I'm going to do is just fairly loosely just roll it up. The paper will come apart a little bit in the middle, but don't worry about that. Just keep it going and going and going and going. Just keep it looking for that, like just sort of coax it a bit. And that is going to be our sand mat once it's painted and in place. Rolled up sand mat. Right, next thing I've done is I've cut some strips of foil here, like long sort of straps, and given them a sort of pointy end. These bits of foil are like off the foil cap from a wine bottle, like Airfix suggested for backing of cockpit straps and things. And then just sort of formed it round a pen just to give it a bit of a curve, and then we'll put it around this bundle, and this will be a strap to hold it all in place. Okay, so what I'll do is I'll get it roughly in place like so. I'll then find a bit of super glue, so like that, dab on a little bit of super glue, and just push that into place and let that set for a second. Didn't see it, did you? There you go. Just put a bit of super glue under here and then push that into place and let it set. They can cut just a couple of tiny squares of this foil, you know, the offcuts of the foil. Get a bit more super glue. Like that. And there it is. Like that. And what I'm just going to do now is just pop these on top, and these are going to be like buckles on the straps. So first of all, what I've done with the markings here, so I've gone over them really gently with like a 400 grit sanding stick, and it's just sort of taken some of the edges off, bits of paint off and stuff like that. And I've then just gone over with a very sort of thin coat of the Portland stone colour, so it just dulls them down a bit. Okay, so this is going to sit pretty much on top of it, so you can't really see very much behind it, but that's going to sit about there somewhere. I think just under there maybe. What we can do, we can squish it a bit so it actually sits in a bit better, like that. Okay, so we'll jam those in there, one out either side, then I'll drop in a bit of glue and we'll paint them up. Right, so first, I've got to figure out a better way of doing this. First of all, I'm going to just paint the metal bits with some primer. Actually, I'm going to paint all the bits with a primer. Don't know why I'm saying that, because the plastic needs priming as well. The paper obviously doesn't need priming, it'll just soak up whatever colour we put on it. But here on the metal, we'll just put some primer there and there. And then on these bits of supposedly bamboo, I guess, or bits of wood of some description that come out of here. Okay, just do that for the other side as well. So I'm just going to sort of add these sort of suggestions of shadows here. Okay, so just on these little bits here, just put just a tiny bit of a highlight. You know, it's a suggestion that so much of this, it's all smoke and mirrors and suggestion and no real detail. It's fooling the eye into thinking there's more detail there than there actually is. And these ends of what I think is supposed to be bamboo, I'm just doing in a like a light stone colour. It's got a sort of very similar sort of appearance to sort of weathered bamboo, so that's quite handy. Right, and these straps, I was going to do them like leather at first, but then I thought, you know what, they probably would be canvas or something like that, so they can be khaki. So they are indeed in painted khaki. So there we go. Straps are painted, shading's done. They look a bit grubby, which is good. And I think they sort of fit the rest of the KATY. So I'm very happy with those indeed. So first of all, I've got some regular household electrical flex. Stripped it down, taken one of the 3 cores out. Stripped that down because that's all plastic coated as well. Unwound the copper, taken about just over half of it, sort of twisted it up to make this rope like thing, and I've just opened up the ends there. So what I'm going to do now is I've got one of these bead things. You know, you can buy at an art shop, craft store, wherever. Chops the end off of it, so just got the eye and a little stub of stub of metal here. And then what I'm going to do, I'm just going to super glue this in. Just sort of teased out some of this copper, and I'm just going to super glue that into the copper. And then when, if and when it actually sits in there, I can bind it up with a bit of tin foil, you know, like we did for the straps on the sand mats. I put a bit of that around it, like the end of a cable, and that should be okay. So we'll just wait for that to dry and see where we go. Right, so that's what it looks like when it's the super glue is set into it, and I'll just do a little sort of band around this part now of metal just to make it look nice. So the only thing I've got to do now is a map to sit in there. So I've got a piece of paper, just fold it over like that to make it look a bit like a map, and then just onto a bit of more sort of solid cardboard to act as a map, you know, like a map table, map base, you know, sort of more solidy thing. And then once those are done, I'll paint that to look a little bit like a map, and then put a black retaining band over, a bit of foil just around it to look like a retaining piece, and then that can go in the front as well. Then when it's all done, it can go in the front here, just resting here. I think it's like, yeah, Anson's just sort of picked it up and props it there for a while, because obviously it will fall out otherwise. So maybe just sort of props it up like that for the minute. Okay, so it's got a map there as well now. And that's pretty much the KATY as I remember it from the film. At the start of the film anyway, she had sand mats, she had divisional markings, she had tow rope, and she had a map in the front. Let's get on with the diorama then. So the diorama, now the first thing is deciding on your base. This here is a photo frame, a picture frame, mainly because I'm not going to make a nice job of clean cuts around there to make a lovely setting. So I'm going to make the diorama on this. Obviously I've taken the glass out. This is the hardwood backing that comes with it, and I've kept the retaining clips underneath because I want them to be quite secure. We're going to put some foam in here and sculpt it. So the first thing I need to do is very roughly put the, no, don't roughly put your model on, put your model roughly in where you want it to be. I'm happy with that sort of thing. Now, KATY's going to be on a road between the rough desert sand here, and there's more rough desert sand here, but there's going to be barbed wire along there. So what we want to do really is have this sort of area lower, this area built up a little bit, and then we're going to mould in some clay and stuff like that, and I'll show you what we do. But we do a rough idea of where it's going to fit first. That would be grand. So next, I've just got some foam board here. I'm just going to put it roughly in the corner, and it's going to go about there and about there-ish. Yeah, it's going to be that sort of size, like that. So we can cut that off. The other side's going to be pretty much the same, actually, judging by that. So actually, if we cut that off there, like that, and do a sort of a wavy cut there, that should be us. Now if you're doing this, do please be careful with cutting. Use a steel ruler and a good knife, and don't try and go through all in one go necessarily. Just gently draw the knife along and go over it again. This way you won't slip and chop your fingers off, or at least cut them badly. Last thing you want. I know it's an ambulance, but we don't actually want you bleeding, do we? This bit, of course, you can cut freehand. But again, it's the same principle though. Just go over the cut a few times with your knife. And there we go. So then if we get the frame back and put the pieces in, already you can see that's what we're aiming to do. With Katy running along the road in the middle of these bits. Now what you can do also is put a few little small bits here to increase the bumps, or you can just do that with the modelling clay when we do it in a minute. But first thing to do, of course, is to glue these in, and you can just use PVA or wood glue or something like that. That will grip. Something else I like to do before I start is just to score up the surface of this, because sometimes the clay won't stick to this this foam board surface. This one's got a paper coat, so it might be okay, but just to be sure, give it a good old going over with an old blade or something, just to roughen up the surface, to give it a key to grip to later on. This should be fine. I mean, you can if you want. If you want to make a bit noise, just do that as well. And that will be fine. And the last bit of prep I'm going to do here is just to put tape over the top of the frame here, because I don't want anything going onto my nice clean surface. That's why we've got a nice clean surface, is we don't want that going any other colour than black later. So, you know, stuff's going to go up on the sides, that's not a problem, but I just want all of this taped up so it keeps it nice and clean and safe from mud and scratches. Right, so to do the basic moulding of the ground, I'm going to use this air drying clay. Just got it from my local hobby shop. It was what, about £3 or something for a kilo of this stuff. It's air drying, so it's you just leave it to dry for several hours. Don't need to bake it or anything silly like that. You can use it with your hands, you can use tools, whatever, and then just make a smoothed out version of what we have here, essentially. So I'll have a go at that, and then let's see where we go. Once you've got your basic shape in, you can start smoothing stuff out with a wet finger, just to make it take some of the finger marks out, and also just smooth out the sand. Remember, this is sand, so it's going to be wind blown. It's not going to be quite as craggy as maybe sort of rocks and stuff like that. So you can just sort of gently, don't get rid of all everything you just put in, obviously, but just, you know, gently just sort of mold things around, make little humps of things. What we're also going to do is remember the line here and just draw it in with my thumb, but maybe do sort of a few crisscross lines like that. Just look at, like, a few vehicles have been through recently. And then on the other side again, just smooth it all out. If you need to put in a bit more, do. It's fine. It does get a bit slick when it's wet. There we go. But just sort of smooth out some of these sort of more rounded edges, because, you know, there's not any sort of rounded lobe-like edges, lobe-like edges in sand. It's all sort of wind blown and stuff like that. Now, we are going to put in some rocks and stuff like that as well. So there are going to be times when like the wind sort of sand gathers around stones, but we'll do that with the texture that we're going to put on. This is just like the underlying skeleton of what we're going to do. Okay, so just keep making sure you just iron out any fingerprints, any sort of anything too bumpy, too sort of edgy, too much of an edge. Won't be many edges in the desert here. That's not bad. And also make sure it actually does fill the frame. If you need to, put a little bit down of this stuff in, maybe just prod it in with a little spatula or end of a knife or something like that, you know, just a sort of a flattish blade, just to sort of prod it in like that. Okay, and then smooth it over. It's quite nice working with clay, actually. You can see why they did it in Ghost. Okay, that's getting on its way. What you can do also, another thought whilst you're at it, if you have got like bits that stand up and you want to keep them standing up, maybe you can, I'll try it on this one, see if I can see. We can create like mini sand dunes, so rub like that and then just push your finger into there, and you see it forms like a sort of a crescenty shape, and maybe a few of those, because that's what sand does. It forms like these crescenty dune shapes. Maybe a few more of those, especially on the side that's not the minefield. Minefield might be a little bit more dealt with, a little bit more stepped on and stuff. There we go. Just a suggestion. It's not like a great sort of Lawrence of Arabia dunes, but just a sort of suggestion of sand dunes. Okay, now the thing is, we're going to have to let this dry. That's going to take a long time, so we'll just work it a little bit more, just until we're absolutely happy. Remember, we are going to be putting texture on top of this, so a lot of really small imperfections you're not going to notice. But for the moment, I think we're very nearly there. Just put in a few more lines of vehicles. There we go. Okay, it's difficult to see, I guess, but that's kind of the effect we've got now. Okay, and we're going to let this dry. Actually, I'm going to go around a bit more pickup, because I'm so fussy. I'm going to go around and pick up a few more bits on the sides here as it's drying. And then when it's dry, we'll be back and we'll start on the next stage. See you in a bit. So a day later, the clay has dried up nicely. So now I'm going to put some sand texture on. This is an acrylic mix, like a gritty sand coloured mix. You can just sort of brush on, you can use palette knives, you can use whatever you like really, and just coat the whole thing with this. And then we're also going to start adding some bits and pieces of rocks and things like that as well. Obviously, don't use your best brushes for this, but whatever you use does wash out in water. So you're not going to have a sacrificial brush here. You can wash them out and get them back into shape and things. It's not the end of the world. This also will fill up any small cracks and things like that, maybe caused by the sand, the clay underneath drying. It will smooth out some of the lumps and bumps as well, the ones you don't want. you know, fingerprints and things like that, if you've got any of those left. It will clean those out. On the bulk of the land here, just uses sort of stubby stippling sort of action. On the part where the tracks are, I tend to be more sort of stroking it along like that. But this dries in actually relatively quickly. It's, I don't know, 30 minutes or so. So you've got time to mess around with it, but it's not going to take all day to dry. The sort of the thinner the application, it becomes more just like a paint. But the thicker the application, it becomes more textured, because obviously there's more gritty bits in it. So just keep pushing it around. Well, that's really well. Now, it's an acrylic, it is water based, but it will act a bit like a glue as well, so you can actually put things in when this is on and they will stick down. But we won't rely on that, we will actually put some glue on as well for various bits. Okay, so once you've covered it basically, then start just sort of moulding it a bit more, stippling a bit more. Get rid of some of the more obvious brush marks out in the edges here where you don't want them. And already that is actually looking pretty good. Now I'm going to put a bit more of a thicker line. Make sure you get into the corners as well. I'll put a slightly sort of thicker line of it along these ridges, because I want to put some rocks and stuff in there. And of course the barbed wire will go here as well later on. Not for the moment anyway. There we go. And then this middle section, you just want to give a bit of a drag to it, just to give the impression of vehicles having gone over maybe. Okay. What we will do in a bit is just go around these edges and just clean up the sides. Or what we can do, actually no, what we can do, just push it up the sides. Why don't we try that? We'll push it up the sides, make it part of the diorama. There we go. Right, so next I'm going to start placing a few rocks and stuff here and there. Now what my idea is that first of all these will sort of define the edge of the road a little bit, but also it will give me a better idea of what's going on. I kind of think that people driving along will sort of see rocks in the road and throw them to one side. So there'll be a few along the side of the road. They're sort of different sizes and stuff. Okay, so you don't really need very many big rocks, because this is, after all, a desert. And most of the big rocks are going to be underneath the sand. Right, so next thing I'm going to put on... I should tell you about the rocks, shouldn't I? Silly me. Excuse me. The rocks are these things. You get a box of them, Battlefield rocks. Actually, bits of cork. They've been chewed up, but they look quite convincing. Next thing I'm going to put on, next level, is some ballast. Just sort of regular railway ballast from hobbyist ballast. And I'm just going to drizzle a bit of that around. Mainly, again, to sort of imply this sort of side of the road thing going on here. Doesn't matter if there are a few in the road, because they would have been kicked up. But I like a few sort of scattered more by the sides like this. You can have a few off-road as well. Okay. Doesn't matter if there's a collection of them anywhere. You know, just random bits of rock. Which do exist in the desert. Okay, then I've got some sort of coarse sand I'm going to mix along. Again, the idea is that the vehicles along here will sort of clean the side of the road, or clean the centre of the road, and will tend to sort of, the other sort of smaller stuff gets thrown to the side. And you can scatter a bit out here as well. Maybe a bit more over here. And of course on minefields, they will make sure that there's a good scattering of bits of rock. Then another layer of sand. This is even finer sand. And I'm actually going to run a bit of it down the middle of the road as well. Just because vehicles, you know, tend to, if it's a narrow road like this one appears to be. In fact, I'll put a few slightly bigger pieces as well. If you know, trucks or whatever come down the road and it's a single road, then the middle tends to get stuff in it as well. You can just sort of sprinkle it on. Okay. Just remember, this is actually a desert, so the this top stuff will be the finer stuff. But there we go, that's okay. I'm happy enough with that. A bit more over here. Never quite happy, are you? Never absolutely happy. There you go, that'll do me. I'll stop now. Next thing we're going to do is seal that in for a moment. We're going to seal that in with some hairspray, some lacquer hairspray, just to seal these pieces as they are. The next thing to do is to spray a pale sort of deserty colour, just to sort of mix down these stones a little bit closer to the base colour. And then we'll just give a bit of contrast, sort of shading colour, with a very slightly darker, like US stone grey stone. What's this one called? US earth yellow. We'll just give that a bit in, just to give a bit of colour variation. Nothing too heavy though. So we've got our base pretty much done now in terms of the sand and the rocks and stuff like that. I think they're all right. So what we're going to do now is a bit of vegetation and the barbed wire. And first of all, I'm going to make the warning post. Now, I don't know if there was a standard scale for warnings about minefields in the Second World War in North Africa. Maybe there was, but anyway, just looking at the film and looking at the diorama and the sizes of this, that and everything else, I think 2 lolly sticks is the depth and sort of that sort of size would do. Universal source of wood, the lolly stick. So what I'm going to do is just going to chop them up to size and then have a look and see what they look like. The other thing is the panel on the film was actually 4 bits of wood. So look at that, almost exactly 3 centimeters. Lovely. So what we'll do is we'll chop each of these in 2 lengthways as well, So you have 4 slats. That way, if they don't exactly line up, that's good. We can just knock the edges a little bit, make it look a bit more weathered. They're painted black, but we can then add a little bit of edging to make it look older. Anyway, we'll worry about that in a minute. First of all, I've got to chop these up to size. The other thing to remember with lolly sticks is this outside edge is rounded over, so you might just want to sand that a bit flatter so it butts up properly against the other pieces. What I've done with each of the lolly sticks, and I've cut it to length roughly, and I've just scored or cut a V-shaped groove right down the centre. Only a very, very gentle one, because that will save me having to actually separate them and then glue them back together again when there's all 4 of them. If we put the 2 together, think and see with a bit of glue, they will actually look like 4 planks put together, when in fact you've only got 2. So that's saving a bit of time and glue. Glue these up, trim them to size, and get on with painting them. And now we've got the board dried up, we can paint it black. I've got a rough placement of the text just gently drawn out in pencil, but I am going to very carefully add this white on. That kind of sets the height of the rest of the text here. There we go. I think that's pretty much okay. And for the barbed wire, I'm using this stuff from Edward Photo Etch. It's just sort of wrapped up, sort of that way around. Just have to chop the frets off here and then just wrap around. Spray it with some primer because it is quite brass at the moment. Then spray it silver, I guess, and then maybe just sort of fleck some bits of rust on it as well. There we go. I wrap this stuff around a polythene bottle like the one for Microset, for example, because I'm going to tack every now and again with a bit of super glue, and I don't want it sticking to the bottle. We're going to add a bit of sort of deserty foliage. Now, first of all, you can get like these little tufts of sort of grassy stuff. They're just stick-on ones, and if you stick them between rocks or next to rocks that are already there, they actually look pretty cool. They're fine. I just want something a bit more sort of upright. So what I've got here is, don't look very much. Near where we are, there's some piles of sand on the fields near us. I think they're going to fill in the sand eventually into the cracks in the soil or whatever. I don't know what it's there for. Whatever. There's grass that grows on it. And if you pick up some of the grass from there, the roots are like this. What you can do is just gather together some of these roots. Just sort of tease them out a bit first. Then kind of fold them in half. And give it a twist, and hey presto, you've got like a sort of a deserty, scraggly, dead something, and we can sort of put those in. So I'll put a couple of those in as well, put a few more rocks around the base of them to make them look like that's where they should be growing, and that'll be our vegetation done. So just pushed a hole in here, I'll put that in, and just sort of feed in. Fit it in like that. And there we go. Actually looks pretty cool. I can put another one in as well. Maybe just up around here somewhere, just to not to make it too symmetrical across the piece there. There we go. Now we just sort of poke that in through the hole. There we go. Let's take that straggly bit off there. There we are. A couple of bits of desert foliage. So I'll get a couple of little rocks and maybe plant those next to them. We can do that very easily because we've got loads of rocks. It's just a case of like sorting through them and thinking, oh, that's a nice rock. You know, when you've got all these, you just sort of go through them. The big problem, of course, is if you shake them up, then all the big ones come to the top, which is no good because the big ones really are too big at this scale. But we'll try and find a couple of smallish ones, and we'll just put a dab of PVA onto the bottom of them before we put them on, so they'll sit white glue. If polyvinyl acrylate, is it? Polyvinyl acrylate? White glue. Put a bit of white glue because it dries transparent and we won't ever see it again. That's good. And we'll put another little rock in front of that, just to cover up some of that. Well, the Eduard wire really didn't work out. I tried everything I could to get it to go round something and stay put. I tried the bottle I've just shown you with super glue. I tried putting it around something wooden and using solder to hold it all in place, and it was rubbish. It just wouldn't work. I think it's great for straight lines of barbed wire, but couldn't get it to go round and round. I suppose you probably have to anneal it or something like that, and I can't be doing that. So what I've done is I've got some of this Battlefield razor wire from Army Painter, and I'll spray that up with some rust as well and put that on. That looks a little bit more likely to stay put. Right, I don't know if you can see. I'll just shift this around a bit to show you. So the barbed wire here, again, it didn't really hold its shape around the loops, but what I did was I ran a bead of the barbed wire along the bottom and just soldered those up. I can, I guess, just dab some texture over that to make it look a bit better. Let's see if I can separate these a bit more. It does bend, this stuff, but you know, it takes a bit of effort. So I'll just maybe cover up that bead of barbed wire on the bottom with a bit of the texture material. I've put the sign in. I just used a regular craft knife, cut a hole in the clay, put that in with a bit of PVA, and I'll just put a few rocks around the bottom just to make it look like they've been put there to keep the sign up and stop it blowing over in the wind. When that's done, I will just run that bit of texture around there. I'll just paint off these rocks a little bit, just sort of dull them down a little bit. There's a little bit too dark at the moment, so I'll just maybe give them a bit more sandy colour. And then that, I think, will be my little diorama complete. I don't see what else I need to do, really. There we go, a nice little group of rocks at the bottom of the sign to keep it in place. Yeah, so I'll just have a quick go over with some texture just to hide a little bit of those bit of that barbed wire at the bottom. And when everything's dry, you carefully take off the paper you've used to protect the frame. I say carefully because some of the texture would have stuck to it, and I don't want that coming off with it. I'd rather it sort of stayed on the diorama, if that's okay. Again, you know what, this is the first one of this scale I've done. I've never done anything with a frame before, so it's not going to be perfect. I'm sure there are those of you who are going to do a much, much better job of this than I ever will. But I'm not unhappy with it. I'm not unhappy at all. Ice Cold in Alex has been one of my favourite films for such a long time. And when Airfix said they were doing the KATY Ambulance, I knew straight away that's Ambulance. That's from my film. And I've been looking forward to building it ever since. And Airfix did make a bit of a meal of getting it out. Well, they didn't. There's all sorts of reasons why they didn't get it out in time, but it's supposed to have been out in spring from what I remember. And here we are in September. It was out last month. Anyway, so there we go. That all sits there nicely. Then all we have to do is get our Katy and put her in place. I think she'll go about there. And there we go. So there we have it at last, my friends. The Airfix 1/35th scale Austin K2Y or KATY Ambulance as it appeared in the film Ice Cold in Alex. So there it is. In the main, a wonderful experience. I think the result's pretty fab in my humble opinion. I really enjoyed it. I hope you did too, and if you did, please remember Imperial thumbs up on the like button below, and if you haven't done so yet, please subscribe to the channel. It doesn't cost you anything, helps me enormously. The link is that small button in the bottom right corner. In any case, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time.